The road to the vineyard was narrower than I remembered. Maybe it had always been that way, or maybe the years had changed the way I saw it. Either way, I rolled down the window and let the crisp autumn air bite at my face. The sharp wind carried the smell of dry leaves and something else, something old, like dust sealed behind a door too long shut. It was just past 7 in the morning. I had driven through the night from the hotel in town, unable to sleep after the funeral. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel pulling up to this place again after 25 years. A punch in the gut, a wave of nostalgia. Instead, there was a hollow quiet, like something was waiting. The mailbox was still there, rusty hinge, leaning slightly, creaking in the wind like it hadn't been touched since the Clinton administration. The paint on the gate had peeled, but the color beneath was unmistakable, barn red. I hadn't seen that exact shade in years, and somehow it pulled something tight in my chest. The vines had grown wild around it, climbing like ivy up a secret. It felt like the land was trying to keep me out. I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching under my boots, and paused. A faint line cut through the gravel, too even to be from wind or weather. Someone had driven here recently. From where I stood, I could see the house in the distance. The roof sagged a little. Windows boarded. The barn next to it leaned like an old man favoring one hip. But the vines, they still stood tall, like they didn't care who came and went. I hadn't told Elijah or Miriam I was coming back. Didn't feel like I needed to. After Mom's service, they'd both vanished fast. I knew where Elijah had gone, back to his law firm in Sacramento, his real wife and fake life. Miriam, she didn't say. She never said much. Me, I went back to the rental car, back to the hotel, and then here. Austin had stopped feeling like home a long time ago. Divorced, no kids, too many hours at the architecture firm. It was easier to bury myself in projects than face the mess that was family. The gate groaned when I pushed it open. That sound, I hadn't heard it since the day I left, but my body remembered. A pulse, quick and deep, hit me in the chest. I stepped inside. The scent hit me first. Grapes, soil, dry wood, and beneath it all, Mom's lavender soap. Faint, but there. A memory rushed in. She used to hum while trimming the vines. Always that same tune. I stood still, letting it wash over me until another memory shoved its way in. The fight. The last time I saw her before I left. "You'll understand one day," she said at the door, tears in her eyes. "When it's too late." I didn't look back then. I do now. Everyone blamed me for what happened. The deal that nearly lost the vineyard. I was 22, full of ideas, and trusted the wrong man. Elijah made sure everyone knew it was my fault. Miriam didn't have to say anything. Her silence was louder than words. They called it the exile, like I was some biblical cautionary tale, and yet the will still had my name on it. Equal shares, equal rights. Except somehow I never got the deed, never saw the papers. Elijah waved me off at the reading, smug as ever. "You're not ready to handle this land," he'd said, like he was the gatekeeper now. I stepped further down the path, gravel grinding beneath me, and stopped. Wedged in the gate hinge, barely visible beneath a curl of vine, was a small envelope. Yellowed, cracked at the edges. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, "For you." I opened it with shaking hands. The letter was dated 2 months before her death. The ink had smudged in places, but the words were clear. "There are things I couldn't say while alive. The vineyard holds what I couldn't carry to the grave. Come back. Come soon." I read it twice. 3 times, then folded it back into my coat pocket like it might vanish if I let it go. The gravel path took me to the barn. I hadn't been in there since, hell, maybe high school. I always thought it was falling apart, but as I approached, something caught my eye, partially buried in the dirt near the side. A real estate sign. I bent down, pulled at it. "Property pending sale." No logo, no agent name, just those 3 words, dirty and bent, but new, not 25 years new, more like recent. I stood there a moment, stunned. Was this some kind of mistake? The vineyard was supposed to be passed on, split equally. I might not have shown up much, but my name was on the will, and Mom had said I had decision rights. So how the hell was it up for sale? The image of Elijah at the will reading returned. His cold tone, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I clenched the letter tighter in my coat pocket. The words rang louder now. "The vineyard holds what I couldn't carry." I turned toward the barn, heart thumping. The door resisted at first, swollen with age. Then it gave, groaning like something in pain. Dust burst into the air, thick and blinding. I waved my hand in front of my face and stepped inside. The space was dark, still. Then I saw it. A blinking red light. Mounted high in the rafters, pointed right at the door, was a surveillance camera. New. Not something you find in a place like this. Not unless someone wanted to watch. I froze. The barn was supposed to be abandoned. I could hear my own breath, too loud. The letter in my pocket felt heavier now, like it carried more than just words. I whispered, barely above a breath, "What the hell did you leave behind, Mom?" The house stood quiet, too quiet for what it used to be. I pushed the front door open, and the smell hit me first. Oak soaked in years of still air, a hint of mold, the faint trace of something once warm now gone sour. It was the smell of time that had stopped moving the day I left. Dust floated through the light breaking in from the window, like memories that refused to settle. I hesitated before stepping in. The floors creaked in protest, the kind of sound old wood makes when it remembers too much. The hallway stretched out, lined with photos I hadn't seen in years. Only now, my face was missing from most of them, cropped out neatly, as if erased by choice. I paused at one frame that used to hold a picture of all three of us. Now, it was just Elijah and Miriam, smiling like they had never known a third sibling. Mom's cane leaned by the door. That's all she'd left behind. Her favorite scarf, the scent of her rose lotion, her little porcelain angels, gone. I ran my thumb over the cane's handle, smooth and worn from her hands. A lump rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. The dining table was still there, just as it had been the night I walked out 25 years ago. The same lace runner, the same dent on the corner from when Dad dropped a bottle of wine. Only one thing was missing, the chair that used to be mine. My spot, the one where I'd laughed too loud, argued too much, loved too hard. In every home, Mom used to say, silence speaks louder than anger. Now that silence filled every corner. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like being erased. I moved through the living room, the echo of my own footsteps reminding me how long it had been since laughter lived here. A draft swept through the broken window frame, pushing a faint shiver through my spine. The house had forgotten me. Maybe that was the point. And then, like a cruel joke, memory found me. A dinner, long ago, before everything fell apart. Elijah at the head of the table, his wine glass half full, his voice sharp as ever. "You ruined everything Dad built," he'd said. "You've always been reckless. You always will be." Mom's eyes had darted between us, pleading silently for calm, but her silence only made it worse. I'd stood up, my chair scraping across the floor, the same sound that haunted me when I found that empty space just now. That was the night I left. A noise snapped me back. Footsteps. Upstairs. I froze, listened again. They were faint, but steady. One step, then another. I waited, holding my breath. Maybe it was the wind, maybe the house settling, but something told me it wasn't. I climbed the stairs carefully, one creak at a time. The light grew dimmer as I reached the landing. Mom's old room sat at the end of the hall, door slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Everything had changed. The furniture was rearranged. Her vanity mirror faced the wall, and the bed was made too neatly. But what caught my attention was the desk, her writing desk. The drawer that once held her letters and notes now had a silver lock, new, out of place. I pulled out the pocket knife I'd carried since college and wedged it into the seam. The wood cracked softly and the drawer slid open. Inside was a folder marked Legal Revision 2022, Confidential. My pulse quickened. I unfolded the first page. Authorization of sale for the Vineyard. Signed, Margaret Hale. Only, it wasn't her handwriting. I knew every curl of her pen. This was Elijah's. I could almost hear his voice, smug and calm, saying he'd handled the paperwork when Mom got too weak to manage things. A chill swept through me. He'd forged her name. My brother had been selling our land behind everyone's back, probably for years. I sank into her chair, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. Elijah once told me, some people aren't made to own things. They just keep them safe for others. At the time, I thought he was lecturing me. Now I realized he was warning me, or mocking me. Maybe both. I flipped through the remaining pages, contracts, bank slips, property assessments, all signed with her false name. Beneath them, I found a photograph hidden between two pages. Mom stood beside a man I didn't recognize. Older, gray-haired, wearing the same ring Dad used to wear. The date stamp at the corner read 2017, years after Dad's death, long after I'd left. Who was he? The way her hand rested on his arm looked too familiar, too intimate, and Elijah was nowhere in sight. I stared at the photo until my thoughts began to blur. Maybe Elijah wasn't her son by blood. Maybe the man in the picture had something to do with the vineyard, its ownership, its secrets. Maybe that was what she'd tried to tell me before she died. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about truth. I put the photo in my pocket and stood up. The air felt heavier now, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then a vibration in my pocket, my phone, unknown number. I answered without thinking. "You shouldn't have opened that drawer," a man's voice said. Calm, steady, cold. I froze. "Who is this?" No answer. Just silence. Then the line cut off. I looked around. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. My hands were still shaking as I glanced toward the rotary phone in the hallway, unplugged, dusty, dead for years. A breeze touched the back of my neck. I turned. The window was cracked open, swaying slightly in the fading light. Was it the wind? Or someone watching? I didn't move. Just stood there, feeling the weight of everything shift around me. The house that once belonged to us now felt like it was studying me, remembering me again, but not with warmth, more like suspicion. "Who else knows I'm here?" I whispered. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer. I woke that morning wrapped in Mom's old quilt, its weight both comforting and confining. I stared at the ceiling, ears alert for phantom sounds. The phone call the night before still rang in my mind. Was it real, or a trick planted to disturb me? But I chose to treat it as real. Better to move forward than live in doubt. I rose and stepped outside. The vineyard lay misty, the sun just lifting through fog. The vines were heavy with dew. The air tasted cold, like truth waiting to be revealed. I paused at the path and found muddy footprints, too large for my shoes. Heavy tread, recent. They led toward the barn. My heart pressed me to follow. Mom used to say, "A vineyard remembers every secret you bury under it." That line felt sharper now. I followed, step by step. I entered the barn again, flashlight in hand. The scent was harsher, metal and dust, but faint perfume too, a scent I recognized but rarely smelled anymore. That perfume was Mom's, but it felt wrong here. I noticed a padlock on the cellar door, new, gleaming, out of place. It hadn't been there yesterday. My breath tightened. I found a crowbar in the corner and forced it open. The hinges protested but gave in. Inside, crates labeled Archive 1998 stood in rows. I pried one open, and inside lay journals, letters, transaction logs, pages against pages of my mother's handwriting. Then an envelope slipped free. I caught it. The words, "My son, for when you come home," were scrawled across it. In trembling hands, I unfolded the letter. The handwriting shifted, familiar, yet laced with purpose. Mom revealed the man in the photograph was my biological father, William Thorne. After Dad's death, she had wed silence with secrecy. He helped fund the vineyard during lean years, but in public, she had to protect me from scandal. His name was hidden. Elijah's assumed. She wrote, "I never meant to let them erase you, but I had to hide you to keep you safe." My head spun. All the distance I felt from Mom, the confusion, the emotional half-truths, all of it suddenly made sense. She was protecting me in the only way she thought she could. Her love was messy, silent, necessary. I found a photograph tucked behind ledger pages. Mom standing by the gate, hand gently resting on a man's arm. His face blurred, but the ring shone. The same ring Dad wore. The timestamp, 2017. Years after Dad's death. Years after I left. Shock reverberated through me. Elijah absent from the image. Mom beside this stranger. Questions tore at me. Was Elijah ever her son by blood? Was this man the rightful heir? Was the vineyard his legacy more than ours? My mind raced. I knew how to read contracts, to spot forgery. I understood loyalty, betrayal. I would not be fooled. I slipped the photo into my jacket pocket and closed the folder. I placed everything back as if hiding the truth anew. As I stepped out of the barn, the air felt weightier. The morning haze had lifted just enough to reveal a black SUV parked near the gate. Tinted windows, engine idling. Someone was watching. I approached, cautious. It roared away before I reached it. The gravel behind its rear wheels lay disturbed. The edge of a photograph lay next to the tire, a familiar image, cracked and singed. Mom's face had been burned away. I bent to pick it up, heart pounding. The message struck me before I read it. Whoever called me last night knows the truth, and someone intends to erase Mom again. I whispered into the morning light, "You erased her once. You won't erase me." By the time the sun had lowered behind the hills, I was back inside the old records room, a quilt of paper dust and mildew still covering everything from the file cabinets to the floorboards. The letter from my mother and the journals weighed heavy in my arms, heavier than they should have been for paper and ink. I opened the metal drawer that had always stuck halfway, yanked it past the resistance, and there it was. A file folder, fresh manila, marked in neat handwriting. 2023 revision, Vineyard deed. The same tone Mom used when labeling jam jars. I hesitated, then opened it. My name was gone, struck out. The page that followed had the new deed, signed by Thorne. Below it, a notary's stamp. No mother's signature, none of her handwriting. Just neat legal coldness. I could hear her voice, not in a ghostly sense, in memory. The truth hides in plain sight if you know where to look. That line had never made sense until now. Back at the will reading, I'd asked why I wasn't invited. Elijah didn't blink. "You already know your share," he'd said, like my absence was an agreement, like silence was consent. I took the folder, held it close to my chest, and walked out to the living room. Elijah and Miriam were by the French doors looking out at the vineyard like they owned the horizon. I stopped in front of them. Quiet. Clear. "This deed says I have no legal stake. Did you forge my mother's signature?" Elijah turned his head. His jaw tightened. "You're reaching." Miriam's eyes darted down and didn't come back up. I didn't flinch. I opened the folder again, pulled out my mother's letter, and held it up. She wrote this: "Don't let them erase you." Elijah exhaled through his nose, almost amused. "You're seeing ghosts. That document's final." I stared at him. Legal doesn't always mean just. He shrugged. What's done is done. They didn't argue. They didn't fight. That was worse. It meant they thought they'd already won. I went upstairs to Mom's old room. The same worn floral wallpaper, the smell of cedar and old fabric. I closed the door, sat on the edge of her bed. The doubts hit harder than any lie. What if I misread it all? What if I'd let grief twist the story? What if the letter was a plant, a trap? I tried to shake it. I couldn't. So I paced and thought. I remembered her voice again. That warning tone she used only once or twice, when she looked over her shoulder before speaking, when she made me promise things I didn't understand. She was afraid, but not of me. Maybe she tried to protect me. Maybe she failed. But maybe I still had time to fix it. I stared at her nightstand, the place she always hid things. A jewelry box with no jewelry. Just an old ledger filled with her scratchy handwriting. Tucked in the back, another contract. This one dated months before the revision. My name was there, so they'd removed me, erased me. Like I was a mistake that could be crossed out. I closed the box, stood, and said aloud to no one, "You can steal the deed. You can't steal my memory." Evening came, heavy and gray. I went back to the records room, determined to document everything. I laid the deed flat and aimed my phone to take a picture. The lights flickered. The paper, gone. I froze. My hands were empty. Then I heard it, the softest sound. Fabric on wood. A figure at the doorway. Miriam stood there, a gloved hand resting on the doorframe, her eyes nervous. Smile too soft, too practiced. She said, "You should sleep. This fight is dangerous." I stepped forward. She didn't move. She just stood, as if rehearsing her lines in her head. Then the boards behind me creaked. Boots. Wait. I turned fast. Elijah, blocking the exit, his silhouette dark against the hallway light. I didn't raise my voice, just looked straight at him. You took it. Why? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I didn't sleep. Just lay there, eyes open, listening to the walls creak with the wind and my own thoughts. Elijah's voice kept looping in my head like a stuck record. The deed is final. Cold, sharp, final. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, like he was reading a sentence from a page he'd memorized, not something he believed. That's what got to me. Sometime past midnight, I heard voices through the cracked guest room window. Low, intentional. I slipped out of bed and followed the sound across the garden. Miriam stood behind the greenhouse, phone to her ear. She's starting to dig too deep, she whispered. We need to handle it before she calls anyone. The words landed harder than they should have. I didn't know who she was talking to, but I knew who she meant. I stood in the dark, heart steady now. No more waiting, no more reacting. My mother used to say, even silence is a choice. Don't let anyone choose yours for you. I turned away and headed toward Miriam's home office. The door wasn't locked. Her desk lamp still glowed like she'd just stepped out for a moment. I pushed the door open. Everything inside was too clean, too deliberate. The shelves lined with books arranged by color, papers stacked in crisp folders, no mess, no trail, except for the one I was about to make. I pulled open drawers, flipped through files, nothing. But then, behind a smiling photo of Elijah and Miriam at some Vineyard charity event, I noticed a panel slightly ajar. Behind it, a shallow drawer. Inside, one file, cream-colored, marked in ink, unsigned copy, keep private. I opened it slowly. My name was on this one, uncrossed, included. My breath caught. The dates matched. This was the same deed, just before someone had decided I didn't belong anymore. I stared at it for a long moment, as if the paper would start talking, start explaining who changed what and when. Of course it didn't. So I took pictures, every page, scanned it with her office scanner. Then I emailed the files to myself, to 3 old email addresses I hadn't touched in years. I knew what this was now. This wasn't inheritance, it was war. Later I sat out in the Vineyard shed, the one we used to hide in as kids. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, the unsigned deed in my hands. Miriam wasn't just covering tracks, she was choosing sides. Maybe it wasn't greed, maybe it was fear. Maybe she believed Elijah's story more than her own memories. Or maybe, like so many women I'd met in my life, she'd decided it was safer to be close to power than to question it. I didn't hate her for that, I just couldn't let it stop me. Mom had never been weak, she'd just been tired of fighting people she loved. Tired of trying to hold broken things together, and maybe she'd thought I'd return someday strong enough to carry the pieces. The air outside smelled of late grapes and old earth. I closed my eyes, spoke low. You trusted the wrong daughter, Mother, but I won't let them rewrite your will, or mine. The shed door creaked. A figure stepped into the shadowed light. Miriam. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, arms relaxed, face unreadable. Her voice was soft. I thought you'd come here. I stood slowly, letter still in my hand. Why hide the real deed? She didn't answer. Just took a step in, letting the door close behind her. If you go forward with this, she said, almost like a warning, you won't just destroy the vineyard. You'll destroy what's left of her memory. I stared straight at her. Her memory doesn't live in your lies. She didn't react right away, but when I moved to walk past her, she reached out, hand on my arm. Not hard, not cruel, but firm. You think you know what's coming, she said, barely a whisper, but you don't. I woke up to the sound of the wind brushing against the shutters. Miriam's voice was still there, replaying in my head. You think you know what's coming, but you don't. For the first time, those words didn't shake me. They focused me. Fear had burned off, replaced by something sharper. Anticipation. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was watching. Elijah kept his distance that morning. He didn't come down for breakfast, didn't look my way. That told me more than any argument could. But the vineyard wasn't quiet. Not really. There were whispers, short conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I caught a few glances from the workers. One woman, an older staff member who had been with my mother for years, met my eyes a second too long. When I caught her alone by the delivery shed, I asked softly, was there something you wanted to say? She hesitated, looked around, then leaned closer. There's someone you should talk to. Henry Talbot. He worked here all his life. He's at the county hospital now. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He was there the night your mother passed. The drive into town felt heavier than it should have. The sun was up, but the day still felt gray. My palms stuck to the steering wheel, the hum of the tires keeping rhythm with the thoughts I didn't want to face. At the hospital, Henry looked smaller than I remembered. Skin paper thin, eyes tired but alert. When he saw me, he smiled like he'd been waiting. You came back, he said. She told me you would. I pulled a chair close to his bed. You knew my mother well? Worked her vines 35 years, he said. Best boss I ever had. He coughed softly, voice catching. But the night she died, she gave me an envelope, told me to take it to her lawyer if anything happened. My heart slowed. What happened to it? He looked away. Your brother and sister came that night, said they were helping her, said she'd changed her mind. Told me if I didn't hand it over, I'd lose everything she left me. Pension, cottage, health plan. He swallowed hard, voice cracking. I burned it. I shouldn't have, but I was scared. I remember your name on it, though. It was for you. The room went still. Machines beeped, steady and indifferent. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I recorded his words quietly with my phone after asking his permission. Thank you, Henry, I said. He reached for my hand, grip weak but warm. Your mother. She never meant for them to take it from you. She wanted you to know the truth. Don't let them bury it again. The drive back to the vineyard blurred. The fields rolled by like ghosts, rows of vines bending under the weight of the season. I didn't cry until I parked the car. Not from grief, from fury. There's a certain kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt. It rewrites you. It replaces your reflection with someone harder, quieter, unrecognizable. By late afternoon, I was calm again, the kind of calm that comes right before something breaks. When the phone rang that evening, I almost didn't answer. The number was local. Hello? This is Vaughn, the voice said. My mother's estate lawyer. His tone was uneasy. I received an anonymous message this morning. Said parts of your mother's updated will were forged. I think your sister might have been involved. My grip on the phone tightened. Are you willing to go on record? He paused. Not yet. Let's meet tomorrow, off the books. There's more you need to see. I hung up slowly, the silence afterward deafening. Outside, dusk stretched across the vineyard like a shadow. When I reached the front door, there was a small package waiting. No return address, no note. Just my name written in a shaky hand. Inside, wrapped in old tissue, was a burned corner of an envelope. And beneath it, a photograph of me and my mother. The date scrawled on the back stopped me cold. One day before she died, the morning sun had barely broken the haze when I walked the perimeter of the vineyard one last time. The dew still clung to the lower leaves. I needed the stillness, the quiet before what was coming. I wasn't just stepping into a fight anymore. I was walking into an unveiling, and I wasn't going alone. I called Lyra first, told her everything. She didn't hesitate. By noon, she had local reporters rolling in with tripods and mics and that look in their eyes, the one that chases blood in old family names. Henry agreed to speak too. He was weak, but his voice was steady when he recorded his story again. And this time, it wouldn't burn in any fire. I asked them to help set up the courtyard under the old oak, the one where my mother used to hold meetings with workers. Back then, it was just about irrigation lines and harvest dates. Now it was going to hold something heavier. The truth. I laid it all out on display. The original vineyard map, marked by my name and hers. The letter she left me, the altered deed Miriam tried to hide. I didn't rehearse a speech, I just repeated her words in my head. Truth is the only armor the powerless ever had. I wasn't going to beg for justice. I was going to show it, piece by piece. By early afternoon, the courtyard filled. Some staff stood with folded arms, others with wary glances. Family members trickled in slower. Elijah near the back, Miriam not far behind. They stood side by side, silent but alert, watching. I stepped forward and faced them all. My voice was calm. I thanked my mother, out loud, for the vineyard, not just the land, but the values she built into it. Then I said, this is her will, unedited, Unaltered. I'm just here to make sure you see it. I pulled the cloth off the table. The documents were there in plain view. Photographs, her handwritten letter, the original map, her signature beside mine. Copies went straight to the reporters. Phones were already raised. Murmurs rose from the crowd. Elijah shifted his weight, arms folded tight. Miriam's expression cracked, the corners of her mouth pulling downward as if something sour had settled in. I read aloud the letter. Do not let them erase you. My voice didn't shake. Then I turned to them. You didn't just take advantage of the law. You erased a woman's final wishes and rewrote her story to fit your greed. Silence spread like a spill. Elijah straightened, his voice louder now. You think this makes you noble. You abandon this place. You don't get to return and play the martyr. Miriam stepped beside him. You always thought this land would be handed back to you like a birthright. Well, it won't. You're causing chaos in a family that tried to move on. Some of the crowd murmured. A few staff members looked uneasy. One of them, a woman from the accounts office, stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she spoke clear. I was told to backdate a document 2 years ago. I didn't know why at the time, but I see now. I turned to face the crowd. This vineyard was built on truth, not silence, not forgery, and not fear. If they can erase me, they can erase anyone. There was a moment, short but heavy, where I felt the whole crowd shift. Some looked at Elijah now with suspicion, not certainty. That's when he made his move. Elijah stepped forward, parting the crowd. His hand reached into his jacket, and for a brief second, people tensed. I didn't move. Whatever he pulled out, it would be seen. He drew a folder and held it up. This, he said coldly, is the actual deed. The unsigned one you flaunted was doctored. He handed it to one of the reporters. The silence returned, deeper now. People leaned in as the pages were unfolded. Side by side, 2 versions, one with my name, one without. I didn't flinch. I looked him in the eye and spoke low. Only he could hear me. Then you just proved what you feared, that she never meant to leave me out. The courtyard emptied out slow, like the end of a storm. Faces were stiff, quiet, and the ones that didn't speak held more than words behind their eyes. My display stayed up. I left it there for anyone brave enough to look again. Truth doesn't need an audience, it just needs light. But no resolution came. No apology. No admission. Just Elijah's smug smirk, and Miriam vanishing into her own silence. I needed a place where their voices didn't reach. So I walked to the old winery office, tucked behind the bottling shed, forgotten, unlit, stale. Last time I'd been there, I was 13, helping my mom sort harvest records. Now the air was thick with dust and quiet ghosts. Drawers were jammed, papers curled at the edges. I sifted through every file, harvest notes, payroll, old invoices, until a leather-bound ledger slipped open in my hand. Inside was an envelope, sealed. Labeled in my mother's handwriting, Paul Delaney, confidential. I stared at it for a long time before I moved. Paul had worked the southern field rows for decades. Then, one season, he just disappeared. No goodbye, no reason. I pulled the truck out and drove. His house was small, tucked behind a rusted fence a few miles out of town. I knocked once. A curtain shifted. The door opened slow. He was smaller than I remembered, stooped, pale, but his eyes, still sharp. Paul Delaney? I asked. He nodded. I know who you are. I introduced myself. Mentioned my mother's name. That changed something in him. His shoulders dropped, just slightly. I found something, I said, with your name on it. He opened the door wider. Inside, his place smelled like old wood and medicine. He moved slow, but with purpose, until he reached a drawer and pulled out a cassette recorder, dusty, untouched in years. I kept this, he said. Didn't plan to. But when she passed, and they came knocking, I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. He clicked it on. The static hit first, then voices, clearer than I expected. Elijah's voice low but agitated. We bury that map. She never comes back. Then Miriam. It's handled. The lawyer saw what we wanted him to see. The tape clicked off. Paul didn't speak for a long moment. Then he looked at me and said, "They cornered me. I was just the field guy, but I saw too much. I stayed quiet too long. If you're here, maybe it's time." I nodded. "Would you sign something? I'll keep your name private." He paused, then nodded again. "For her." I left with more than I'd expected. The tape, Paul's affidavit, and the last piece of my mother's voice I didn't know I needed. That evening I called the same reporter who'd stood under the oak tree days before. We met behind the diner near Main Street. I slid the envelope across the table. "This," I told her, "isn't just about inheritance. It's about the rot underneath a legacy. Let it breathe." She promised it would hit the paper by morning. I called Lyra and Henry that night, told them what I had. They didn't hesitate. Before bed, I stood outside the house, stared at the vineyard beyond the fence line. "Let this land grow with the truth," I whispered, "not with silence." The sky didn't answer, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the fight. Just before dawn, I walked toward the vineyard gate again. The ground still held the night's chill, but the world felt lighter. A group had gathered near the entrance. Strangers, locals, a few holding papers, some snapping photos. One woman looked up and held out the newspaper. There I was, front page. Beside it, Paul's story, his voice, his tape, headlines that couldn't be brushed away. I scanned the road and saw Elijah, pacing, phone glued to his ear. His suit looked slept in, his eyes wild. Miriam wasn't there. I asked around. One staff member muttered, "She left town early, didn't say where." I stared at the driveway, gravel still warm under the sun. "They're running," I whispered, "from shadows they made." That's when the car pulled up. Old Ford, dented side panel. No one moved. The door opened, and out stepped a man I hadn't seen in 25 years. My father. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Everything I'd buried tightened in my chest, because there he was, the man who walked out before the lies began. And now, for reasons I couldn't yet name, he was back. He stepped out of the car like no time had passed, but everything about him told a different story. My father, Charles, hair thinner, back stiffer, eyes tired, but still familiar, the same quiet heaviness in his jawline, the same way he looked at me, like he wasn't sure he deserved to. We didn't hug, didn't even shake hands. He just looked at me and said, "I tried, years back. Miriam told me I wasn't welcome, said it would just stir things up." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. Not to forgive. Not to rage either. He motioned toward the Vineyard Road, the one that curved down past the sycamore tree where he used to show me how to pinch the vine stems just right. We sat there for a long while. He said Mom had written him months before she passed, told him things were shifting, that I might need him, even if I didn't know it. She said, "You'd need truth, but also peace, and that I owed you that." There was a stillness between us after that. The kind that doesn't ache, just waits. The wind picked up slightly. I remembered how that tree used to rattle when storms rolled in. Something stirred inside me. I stood up. "I need to check something," I said, not really asking permission. I walked alone down to the southern edge of the vineyard where the first vine was ever planted, the one Mom used to care for herself. No one else was allowed near it. Even as a kid, I knew it wasn't just a plant to her. It was something sacred. I knelt by the old trunk and started digging gently near its roots. Just a few inches down, my fingers scraped metal. I pulled out a small rusted tin, sealed tight. My hands trembled opening it. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a letter. Her handwriting, dated a month before she died. It started simply, "To my son." She told me everything. The secrets, the fear, the reason she kept me away. She wrote about Miriam's control, Elijah's threats, and about how she knew she was running out of time. "You deserved better," she wrote, "but I couldn't give you this place, not unless you came back to it yourself, not unless you returned stronger than they expected you to be." The last line stopped me cold. "You are the roots now. What you plant, you grow. What you forgive, you free." I didn't cry. Not then. I walked back toward the main gate. A small crowd had formed again. Reporters, vineyard staff, even neighbors. I held the letter in one hand and raised my voice just enough for the wind to carry it. "This is the last piece of her will," I said. "Not about money, not land, about legacy." I read from it, not all of it, just the parts she would have wanted them to hear. There were no loud cheers, no applause, just quiet. The kind that means people are really listening. Elijah was gone, his name already spoken in hushed tones, and just another local warning of what power without roots becomes. Charles stood beside me now, not as a father returning to reclaim anything, but as a man trying to rebuild. "I'm turning this vineyard," I said, "into something bigger than what they left behind. A sanctuary. For women rebuilding from trauma, for veterans trying to find ground again, for anyone who needs soil and silence to start over." Paul's grandson came forward, a soft-spoken kid, barely 20. I offered him a job, permanent. He gripped my hand like he'd never let go. That moment, that's when I felt it. Not grief, not vengeance, just clarity. It was time. A few hours later, as the sun leaned low, I walked to the same gate I first pushed open 9 chapters ago. Back then, it had creaked like a warning. Now, it felt like home. The wind carried lavender, dry earth, and old oak, the scent of memory. I brought with me a young vine, fresh, unbent, dug the soil gently right next to the old one, planted it, pressed it into the earth with both hands, and whispered, "We're home now, Mom, for real this time." Behind me I heard footsteps. Lyra and Henry stood together smiling. They held a small wooden sign between them, hand-carved. "Welcome home, the Delaney Legacy Vineyards." I nodded, didn't need to say anything else. The story wasn't over, but the war was